Good day, learners. How are you? Previously, we learned that drama, which is another work of the imagination arising from man's capacity for invention, and you also learned the basic principles of drama, which you must learn first for you to fully understand and appreciate drama both as a subject and as a performance. In this lesson, let's get to know the literary devices and techniques used in drama. Drama, as we all know, it is a form of a written literature that is intended for performance. With this fact, since it is still a written composition, and in English class, drama is a form of literature designed to be performed in front of an audience, the drama uses almost the same literary elements and techniques from other type of literature. Let's explore what are those. Literary elements are the essential parts of storytelling that are found in almost types of literary and narrative writing. And since a drama is a story, meaning a written composition that is performed, it uses almost the same literary elements from other literature. The following are all literary elements that drama uses. We have the plot, character, conflict, setting, theme, and point of view. Now, the plot is how the author arranges events to develop his basic idea. It is the sequence of events in a story or play. The plot is a planned, logical series of events, having a beginning, middle, and end. Now, the short story usually has one plot, so it can be read in one sitting. But in drama, there are so many things happening but still leads to one story. There are 5 essential parts to the plot. We have the introduction or the exposition. It is where the characters and the settings are revealed. It is the beginning of the story where the characters and the settings are revealed. And the introduction can also be called the exposition. Next to that, we have the rising action. This is the part of the story where a conflict is revealed. It's called the inciting force and becomes more pronounced as the story progresses. The rising action is all the events between the introduction and the climax. The climax, this is the highest point of the interest. The interest or the turning point of the story or the moment of greatest suspense. The reader wonders what will happen next. Will the conflict be resolved or not? Next to that is the falling action. At this point, events and complications begin to resolve themselves. The falling action is all of the events between the climax and the resolution. And lastly, we have the resolution. This is the final outcome or the untangling of events in the story. The resolution may also be called the denouement. Next to that is the character. It is a person or other being in a narrative. The plot can only exist with characters. Now, the main character is placed in a situation that contains a problem he or she must overcome. Therefore, conflict exists. Now, most stories also have minor characters who either help or hinder the main character's attempt to solve the conflict. There can be many different types of characters within a story. We have the protagonist, or the main or the central character. Antagonist, this character opposes the protagonist. Often he or she is an opponent to the main character. Round or dynamic characters. A character affected by the events of the story. These characters are usually fully developed in terms of personality. They are described in more detail and their personalities emerge more fully. Round characters usually become enlightened, learn, grow, or deteriorate by the end of the story. Flat character, a character who doesn't go through a change. These characters are usually one-dimensional. And lastly, we have the stereotype characters. a character who is so well known that little has to be said about him or her. These characters are immediately recognizable because of the role he or she plays. For example, the strong silent gunfighter, the nerd, the beautiful international spy, the mad scientist. Notice that there are some stereotypes among those characters, and that is why little is known about them, said about those characters. Next to that is the conflict. Conflict is essential to plot. Without conflict, there is no plot. When we say conflict, this is the internal or external struggle that creates dramatic tension. Conflict does not involve just arguments, but rather, it is any form of opposition that faces the main character. Within a short story, there may be only one central struggle, or there may be one dominant struggle with many minor ones. Conflicts can either be external or internal. As for the external, we have the following types: character versus character, character versus nature, and the character versus society. And for the internal, we have the character versus self. Next to that is the setting. Setting, it is where the time and the location takes place. Now, a setting, for some stories, the setting is very important, while for others, it is not. There are several aspects of a story setting to consider with when examining how setting contributes to a story. The major elements in setting includes the following. You have the place, or the immediate surroundings of the character. You might ask, what is the geographical location? It could be in the mountain, forest, in a city, in a country, in a desert, and so on. Next to that, the time of the day, such as morning, afternoon, or basically just asking what is its historical period, what time or day or year. Next, weather conditions. You might ask, is it rainy? Is it summer already? Is it sunny in that particular story? And so on. Next to that, social conditions, or what is the daily life of the characters like. Does the story contain local color, the writing that focuses on the speech, dress, mannerisms, costumes, and so on. And the mood or the atmosphere. What feeling is created in the story? Is it sad, happy, scary, and so on. Okay, so that's for the setting. Now let's proceed to the theme. Theme, it is the central message of the author. Theme is not the plot of the story. It is the central message of the playwright or the author. It is the underlying truth that is being conveyed in the story. Themes can be universal, meaning they are understood by readers no matter what culture or country the readers are. For example, things are not always as they appear to be. Love is blind. Believe in yourself. People are afraid of change. Don't judge a book by its cover. Those are some examples of theme. Now let's proceed to the techniques used in drama. When we say techniques, literary techniques, these are the tools that an author may choose to use to enhance their writing and to convey meaning in a certain way. Some of these are figurative language. Now, in drama, some writers use idioms or idiomatic expressions. These are expressions that does not mean what it literally says. For example, it is raining cats and dogs outside. That's idiomatic expression. Next is imagery. It is the use of vivid descriptive language that appeals to our senses. What are those? We have seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching. Now, these words, vivid language, descriptive language, is used to create pictures or images in the reader's mind. For example, the crisp white snow floated down through the dark night sky. With this example, you can already picture out what was this particular statement appears in our mind. Probably it touches our sense of seeing, and so on. Aside from that, playwright or an author also uses flashback. It is when an author reveals an event that took place in the past. It is a technique in narrative in which the present story brings into a scene from the past. Foreshadowing. It is when the author gives hints or clues to suggest what will happen as the story progresses. Basically, it is a technique in narrative in which the present story brings into a scene in the future. I believe you are already familiar with this since I've already discussed this one with you in the previous lesson. And lastly, foiled. Now this is a new technique. A foil is a character who is meant to represent characteristics, values, or ideas which are opposite to another character, usually protagonist. Now, a foil is not necessarily an antagonist or the opposite of the protagonist, because when we say an antagonist, it is a character who works in opposition to the protagonist. The antagonist is in direct conflict with the protagonist and presents obstacles to the protagonist achieving his or her goal. Now, the foil, on the other hand, is not necessarily working in opposition to the protagonist. A foil is simply a person that has qualities that is different from the qualities of the protagonist. Now, the key difference then between the foil and the antagonist is that the antagonist's action opposes the protagonist, while the foil's character is in opposition to the protagonist. For example, this is the characters from Romeo and Juliet. We have Mercutio and Romeo, in which these two characters are actually good friends, yet have one very important difference. Romeo is a romantic person, hopelessly romantic, while Mercutius is, on the other hand, he is witty and not at all romantic, and he views love as a physical pursuit rather than an emotional one. Now, he continuously mocks Romeo's devotion to different women and idealized version of Romeo has of love. Now, as a foil character, Mercutio provides some comic relief to Romeo's all-consuming passion, as well as a touch of skepticism and reality. So we can differentiate Romeo now to Mercutio. Basically, using foil, you are making another kind of character that opposes the characteristic of the protagonist. That is how a foil works. So there you go. We defined drama and learned about its elements. That's all for our lesson. I hope you learned something from it today. This is your teacher, Teacher Joy. Thank you and see you again.